Samuel L. Jackson and Vincent Cassel on the same poster, but only 7.8k votes and an IMDb score of 4.7. Maybe that's exactly the problem with the movie. The producers might have said, "Sit back guys, Jackson and Cassel will get us the win anyway." And it looks like the creative department did just that. Let's see together how sitting back can waste both a brilliant idea and good acting. If a movie is dead, its creators must have killed it, but don't think that a dead movie cannot expose its killers. In the movie clinic, we are trying to find out who killed the movie. The first movie where we chase these killers is Damaged from 2024. Let's take a closer look at why we've chosen it as our first guest. A clinic is more likely to receive something damaged than something intact. The fact that the movie is called Damaged is a nice coincidence as it is the first video of the movie clinic. I would be sad if the movie was really good. Such a fitting name for the clinic would have been wasted. According to the Peruvians though, the movie is already a success. In addition to Mr. Jackson and Mr. Cassel, John Hannah also appears in the cast. For those who don't know John Hannah, his acting is so good that he once made those guys believe that this guy was stronger. The surest and most insufferable way to ruin a movie is to ruin the acting, but criticism of acting often adds nothing of value to film education. Everyone knows that good acting is important for a movie. There is no need to spend time and money to understand this. I think selecting low-rated films with good actors and thus eliminating the acting problem will increase the value of the solutions offered at the movie clinic. The two murders in Turkey in 2024 and the murders in the movie were identical. In fact, the release date of the movie was even earlier than the event. When I was looking for the first movie for the movie clinic, I focused more on this movie because of this similarity. When I focused on the movie, I realized that the movie has many problems on a micro level too. Finally, since we are looking for the killer of a movie, I thought it would be better to choose a killer detective movie for the opening. For these reasons, I accept Damaged as our first patient and hope to discharge it at least as slightly damaged. However, witnessing the treatment will mean that you will encounter spoilers. For those who have seen the movie and don't mind spoilers, welcome to the clinic's very first file. We are in Edinburgh, Scotland. Abigail Myers, played by Nicolette McKeown, leaves the synagogue after evening prayers and goes home. She waits for the water to heat up, not knowing that in thrillers it is customary for something bad to happen to someone who wants to take a shower. And there's an unpleasant knock at the door. A delivery at this hour? Abigail goes to the door, looks through the peephole and lets her killer in. All this happens in 90 seconds. Now let's find a name for our first problem. The score. Damaged is a killer detective movie, and like many movies in this genre, characters other than the killer and the detective are very weak. The nature of this kind of movie is this. In order for the detective to meet the killer who will cause him trouble, the killer must first commit a murder. That's all. This is the fate of Abigail and everyone else who is killed for this purpose, to become a score. But an artist must reject the conveniences that scores brings. Scores exist to inject the message "I am a sloppy project" into the subconscious of the viewer. In the next video we will save Abigail from becoming a number. Now, let's point out another problem. Facilitation. We have already said that in poor quality trailers, the side characters are often weak and the dead are often just a number. This weakens the drama because the side characters don't get the importance they should. When we solve this problem, problems pile up in front of the writers. When you give the side characters a soul or when you give them intelligence, the killer's job becomes more difficult. That's why many writers avoid confronting the problems, take shortcuts and make it easier for the killer to score. They give him a very effortless paced walk. Let's take a closer look at the example of facilitation in the movie. Abigail is waiting for the water to heat up so she can take a shower. We know it's evening, there's a knock at the door, she doesn't look like she is expecting a delivery, on the contrary she is worried. Then when she hears that there is a delivery, she is in a good mood. She looks through the peephole. What she sees is a man in a raincoat and Connie probably wearing a mask, whereas Abigail has just come home, she has no umbrella and her hair is dry. Why do we need raincoats? Why is it so late for delivery? Does Abigail work in the morning? Maybe she was on her day off and could have received the delivery in the morning. In Turkey where I live, this kind of overnight delivery service isn't common. Cargo operations are usually finished by dark. I found out that in England and Scotland such deliveries are common. Okay, you might ask, but where is the problem then? Abigail's second facial expression confirms that she's expecting a delivery. Now we come to the point where things are made easy for the killer. Let me share with you these unanswered questions. If the person who arrives is not really a delivery man, then where is the real delivery man? How does the killer know that Abigail is expecting a delivery and will open the door for it? Did the killer impersonate the real delivery man, or did he appear a few days before him with a fake ID? In the case of special deliveries, isn't the day and time clear, so wouldn't the killer also have to kill the delivery guy, etc.? Will the real delivery man appear later in the movie? What was in the package Abigail was waiting for? None of these questions have an answer in the movie, because Abigail is only asked to be a score. When she dies, she will have done her duty. So there is no point in dwelling on Abigail too much, just make things easier for the killer. I think I have made my points. Abigail opening the door for an unknown package is an example of facilitation. In our next video, we'll do the killer's entrance in a different way. Don't worry, I have no intention of catching the killer in the first seconds. I'm just going to provide a logical basis for him to enter the house. Where are we now? Chicago. Interesting. We've crossed a whole ocean. Dan Lawson late arriving on the crime scene, and he is wearing a raincoat. So, he is our killer? But the location is Chicago. He came here from Edinburgh. So far there is no sense of time. We don't know which happens before which. This could be an example of foreshadowing, but it is actually just one of the failed choices in the movie. Lawson here to solve the case, and our writers are here to ruin the scene. There's a case, very simply, Lawson's gonna solve it, and then in the next 10 seconds we are gonna learn the following. Lawson is very smart, Lawson is an alcoholic, there's a case that Lawson can't solve, Lawson had a partner named Walker who once worked on the case that Lawson can't solve. After being bombarded with information, Dan goes to his car, has a drink and listens to an audio recording. It's a woman, her name is Sarah, she wants to talk to Dan. As Dan listens to the recording, we realize that this unsolved case is about the woman. A detective distracts Dan from his busy thoughts. There was a serial killer who disappeared 6 years ago, and it could be the same person who killed Abigail. The killer is back in town. As Dan looks through the files, he sees several images, a saw moving back and forth. The editing gives me 3 pieces of information. Dan Lawson is the killer because we see the saw moving, and this image is from Dan's mind. Dan Lawson could be watching someone kill someone, for example with his hands tied. That could be where the damaged psychology comes from, but it is unlikely, because then he would know more about the killer. Right now, Dan looks like the killer. Dan is replaying the event in his head. Possibly Sarah, the owner of the audio recording, is among the dead people, and a picture of how it happened is eating away at him. The first and third possibilities are strong, but the unnecessary allusion to the raincoats makes the first point stronger. Dan Lawson says, I want to get involved in this case, and his colleague says, good, then have a safe trip. Abigail, as we know, was in Edinburgh. DCI Glenn Boyd is the detective on Abigail's case. He has an attention-seeking, depressed wife. We also sense a problem between them that we don't know about yet. She says cliché things like, I need you, and so on. And Glenn is on his laptop looking at Dan's case in Chicago. What the movie wants us to think is this. There's a series of murders in Chicago. The most recent one happened 6 years ago. That man is thought to be the one who killed Abigail. Even though the locations are different, the detectives are naturally looking for one killer instead of two, because what makes us think that the two killers are the same person is the positioning of the bodies. Both killers dismember the victims and arrange the body part in an order that has satanic connotations. For those who are curious, this is where the movie and the atrocity in Istanbul have something in common. Before going to the crime scene, we learn the reason for the trouble at the Glenn's house. Glenn lost his 2-year-old son about a year ago. The reason he was buried at work was to get over this pain. Let's talk about 2 of the 3 characters that I think shouldn't be in the movie: Brian McCarthy's Avery and Elaine Smith's Elizabeth. Avery Thompson is the first candidate for Abigail's killer. According to Elizabeth's testimony, Avery had a fight with Abigail before and yelled, "I am going to finish her off," or something like that. Avery is the first killer illusion in the cliché detective story. Elizabeth is the witness who will play a critical role. Although both are cliched in structure, my problem isn't that they are cliched, but that there are facilitations in the writing of the characters. Avery is our first killer candidate, but he is also a guy who acts suspiciously and says cliché things all the time.
Well, fuck off, then. Away from my property, officer.
The function that the writers have assigned to him is this: to give him some minutes until the real killer is revealed. If we give the real killer in the first minute, the movie won't last too long, right? When Avery runs away from Glenn later on, the idea that he is the killer is further emphasized. But don't worry, I'm sure he is running away for another reason. When Glenn puts him to bed and asks why he ran away, Avery says, "I owe some bad guy's money," and when asked why he got into a fight with Abigail, I get nervous.
She's a dog minder. Her dogs bark all day and I need my rest.
The Abigail sequence is so sloppy that even this scene at 20 minutes still emphasizes how sloppy the opening scene of the movie was. Avery says he can't sleep. And why is that? Because of Abigail's dogs. And did you see a dog in the first 90 seconds? Did you hear any barking? But I hear snoring. The creative department is asleep. Right now you learned why I put a dog on the left. If the dogs hadn't been forgotten, the neighbors might have been alerted that something was wrong in Abigail's house. If she had dangerous dogs, the killer might have had a hard time reaching his target. Here you see both the score and the facilitation. Facilitation is making an ornamental dog mute, even if you don't forget to put the dogs in. Abigail is a score, and the score should be done without making it wait too long. The killer is the scorer, so you need to make it easy for him. Are the pieces falling into place? The problem is that the earlier scenes are glossed over for the later scenes. When this happens, the movie goes down the drain, because nothing in the final will save you anymore. There is no killer and detective in this thriller. There's a serial killer and a detective. For a serial killer to become a serial, he has to score a second score. This score is Emma Findlay's Grace after Abigail. Abigail was Jewish and Grace is Catholic. It is as if our killer is killing people with an anti-religious motivation. Anyway, we talked about the score. The sloppiness of this score is a real headache. Grace watches TV from a ridiculous angle. Even when the door knocks for the first time, she is all, "I'm coming, what's your hurry?" and she can even sense the knock in advance.
Hang on, I'm coming!
So Grace, if you can sense the knock on the door, why can't you sense that the person at the door is going to kill you? As you can see, one guy in post-production delayed the sound by half a second and that's what happened. Let's ignore this oversight, and Grace opens the door immediately. Our killer's charm is such that he first destroys his victim's vigilance. There is no room for hesitation in Scotland. I won't mention Grace during the treatment phase, because at least we might have been given a reason for her opening the door in the movie. Just kidding, she shouldn't have opened the door to a masked man, though she might have remembered her lover's scent. Still, slowing the scene down a bit, taking out Grace's hang-on, using the movie or TV show as a dramatic addition and having her watch the damn TV from a decent angle might be enough to save the scene. If someone doesn't kill her, the neck pain will kill her anyway. Meanwhile, Dan Lawson is again guilty by editing. This time there is a connection through music. The music playing in the scene where Grace dies is the same music that Dan dances to. Also, Dan doesn't seem mentally stable in these scenes. This gives the impression that Grace's death was somehow caused by Dan Lawson. Another unnecessary implication of the movie. Dan Lawson is already a criminal even without this. I'll explain why in a moment. On our way to catch Avery, we begin to get to know Lara Haddock's Mary better. I think she is the reason why the Peruvians gave the movie a high score. She gets 9 points for her beauty, but unfortunately she doesn't get a passing score for her loyalty. After losing her child, Mary falls into a void, and when she can't find any attention from Glenn, she cheats on him. This is one of the stupidest parts of the movie. Being cheated on is already hard enough for a man, but to transfer it to someone he has just met. But we don't dwell on it. We are a Peruvian now. Think of Mary, think of Mary. The movie is very good. When we find Grace's body, Dan Lawson asks a question that the movie seeks to answer. There's a symbol in Grace's house. So Dan asks this question.
Why do these serial killers always bring this cult shit?
Yes, let's give credit where it's due. Even if the movie can't handle it, it comes up with questions and answers. This question is also important for the direction of the movie. It is as if there is no point in turning a corpse upside down. It is just a functional symbol to cover something up. In other words, this is a sentence that detaches the event from its mythical dimension. It points to a more secular point of view. Just when we are getting serious, I say I forgive the movie. Look at this sentence.
This is just the beginning.
The year is 2024, ladies and gentlemen. This sentence has been used at least 5,000 times before. It is no longer exciting. You can try other sentences or you can just sit back in silence. Don't worry, nothing negative will happen. Because of assigning Grace's house, Glenn says there is something we are missing, and we return to the Abigail's house, where we see something strange through the menorah. The menorah that we saw in front of the window at the beginning of the movie is in front of a bookcase. This strangeness will lead us to some verses from the book. And here I thought of this. How did the detectives not see this at first? The killers cut people into pieces and rearranged them upside down. If I were a detective, if I saw something like this, let alone a reversed holy book, I would think it could be a message. Anyway, we read the verse. This verse is about wolves in sheep's clothing. Who is in this wolves in sheep's clothing? Damn, it could be Lawson again. There have been hints before that he could be the killer. Another hint? So, he is a killer disguised as a detective? What's the point of keeping the focus on Dan? Aren't we trying to create a mystery? After Grace, her mother names a person in the interrogation, Colin McGregor. The first thing I thought of when I heard his name was this guy. A quick word of advice. Don't make characters' names sound like the names of well-known people in real life. It might distract the audience. Personally, I thought of round 2 of the Khabib and Conor fight. I stopped the movie and watched the fight again. So to summarize, if your character's first name is Derek, don't make his last name Obama. Colin, who we know through Grace's mother's mention, was Grace's boyfriend, but their relationship ended abruptly some time ago. We don't have much more for this character at the moment, but we still have him. So let's get to know Dan's ex-partner first. After half an hour, we see the other person on the poster. That's one of the scenes of our movie. It is not clear who is the leading actor, but if I had to choose one, it would be Mr. Capaldi. But the poster misleads us. If I choose this movie just to watch a movie, Samuel L. Jackson would be my choice, but his minutes are not very high. Let's forgive this scene of the movie and accept Gianni Capaldi as the lead, but the character of Glenn Boyd is too sloppy too. One should give himself a little credit there. Walker also gets his share of the film's information bombardment. Sitting with him in a hotel lobby for about 60 seconds, we learn the following about him. He is in the writing business. He doesn't want to be involved in anything other than the murders in the books. For this new job, he decided to give up alcohol and drink milk. It must be hard to write with alcohol. He admitted that Dan was a better detective than he was. His writing business doesn't seem to be doing too well either. He designs alarm systems and pays the bills. And his face changes when he hears Sarah's name. We see how a good actor moves seamlessly from one facial expression to the next.
Sarah,
Dan's look at Walker at the end of the scene when he utters yet another stupid cliche is also worth seeing.
What can I do for you, stranger?
I'm not sure if that's the way to look at someone who's offering to help. There's a problem, I feel. I want you to tell you about a theory of mine. First, look at this view. This is Colin's house. The anthropological record provides a lot of evidence that we destroyed forest with fire, especially after we invented fire. Man's fear of the forest is undoubtedly due to its chaotic nature. Noises, nearsightedness, disorientation, wild animals and trees swaying uncanny in the wind. Man seems psychologically relieved when he destroys the forest. Even though a lot of scientific evidence shows the benefits of the forest air for one's mental health, even though city life drives us crazy, I think some riders still carry this instinctive fear. The jungle is scary, but the reason for our fear is very childish. But if we're right about crazy killer who live deep in the woods, then we can give a solid justification for our silly fear. Yes, I am honored to be the harsh critic of yet another cliché. So let's move on to Honor McGregor, who resides in this beautiful space.
Why are you asking me my whereabouts? I am definitely not a suspect.
Damn, Faz, am I being charged? Yeah, that's how we met Colin. He asked for his lawyer. He got himself a great lawyer. It's a cliché duo.
I think this is over, don't you?
If I was asked what a movie is not, I would say it's not a meal. Think about your favorite restaurant around the corner. Every time you go there, you want to order whatever your favorite food is. You want to experience your favorite the same way it was the first time you ate it. But the movie experience isn't like that. It is overwhelming to see the same shit over and over again. And never forget, there is such a thing as a professional audience. Each movie makes the viewer even more of an expert for the next movie. So, the more you are yourself, the more you can deal with the devastating criticism of these expert viewers. I assure you that what I have mentioned so far isn't even half of my notes on the problems in the movie. There was more than one negative thing that I left out. Let's zoom in on Colin's interrogation. He says he was in Manchester at the time of Grace's murder. The reason he was there? Security systems work. He works for a company called ATAM. Let's remember that Walker was also in the security business. He's got a bump on his head. Glenn says, what's that? He says he hit a table.
I dropped my phone under the table, I bent down to pick it up and boom.
Not surprisingly, we saw Abigail hit someone in the opening scene. That's how we know he killed Abigail. There is a problem that the movie can't keep its mouth shut. It's clear that Colin is now the killer and Dan is technically the killer even if he doesn't say he's the killer. So how do we build the suspense? Of course, you can give me this objection. Sometimes in movies we are told in advance who the killer is. Yes, there are such movies. But the failure of Damaged is obvious on both counts, because they didn't make a decision about what they chose. Or rather, they didn't use the right dosage of foreshadowing. Damaged fails to lay the clues while trying to create a mystery. In fact, it fails so badly that for the moment, all the killers are naked with their identities. Let me put it this way. If one wants to arouse curiosity about who the killer is, it is necessary to reset the signs that the killer is Dan, until the appropriate time. If the film aims to emphasize that Lawson is the killer and direct the story toward how Lawson became a killer, it fails in that regard as well, because it shows Dan as a killer once and then Lawson goes after the killer again. So, is Lawson a man of two personalities? The movie fails there too. At the end of the movie, we will see that one identity is too dominant. So, there is no transition between identities. We also have Dan's own testimony.
This pain will eat away at your insides till you don't recognize yourself.
Let's go back to Colin. Colin is burdened with a number of mental problems. The first one is that he has a hunting license, so the cops think that because he kills animals, he can also kill people. However, we can already see from the bump on his head that he killed Abigail. This issue should have been discussed earlier. He was in a long relationship with Grace. Here he says she is a lost soul. Naturally, everyone bristles. At this point, Glenn, true to the idea of the movie, asks, "What does being lost mean to you? For example, that other men find Grace attractive?" Let's remember what our idea was. These religion myth issues are essentially a veil for other emotions, nothing more. Colin says what matters is that the lost finds his home. So there is anger towards Grace, but it is Colin who finds his home by killing her, while the religious discourse parallels Grace's disappearance. If that's the case, why did he choose Abigail? Here again, the film leaves us with narrative chaos. If I were to force myself to answer this question, I will say the following, but this is my interpretation, not the film's. Colin is trying to assume a fool's identity by killing a religious girl, I would argue. His real target was Grace. He approached her more ruthlessly.
Getting more violent and less control.
No, detective, you are wrong. He has no connection to Abigail, no personal beef with her. But he has a vendetta against Grace, which makes him much more violent. That was the highlight of the film. It was very consistent with the central theme of the film. Colin will get angry after the interrogation, and in one scene he easily shows up near Glenn's house and glances at the woman he will soon kill from a distance. Oh, okay. We accused him unjustly. He is after other serial crimes. Finally, let's add this about Colin. He was expelled from a sect called Kildaton. This places a religious structure behind his misogyny. This connection can be made. However, the scene where he meets the Kildaton sect was overly simplistic. Characters popping up from here and there, more formulaic script.
Do not smear our church, Boyd.
I'm not smearing your church, brother. But to get something good out of this story, I am going to shoot you in the treatment video. Now let's see who is responsible for the deaths of 5 people. So far, only Dan and Walker are in Chicago. Who could have committed the other 2 murders in Edinburgh? Colin and maybe Walker. Walker is in London, but at least he is not across the ocean. These first 5 murders and the next 2 seem to be connected only through Walker. However, we can make all these deductions as if we hadn't heard any of the amateurish information the film has given us. The film's language has already revealed that Dan killed the first 5 people and Colin killed Abigail. There's a really chaotic dinner scene in the film. It's such a scene that the guests don't seem to feel the slightest bit sorry for the host. Glenn says that they haven't had guests over in years. Vincent Castle then talks about his love for friends and Mr. Jackson talks about his love for golf. It's clear that Mr. Castle is French, but when I watched the scene I thought this dialogue was written for Mr. Castle, therefore Mr. Jackson must also be interested in golf in real life. A little research.
And boom.
The moment a writer loses respect for himself is the moment he accepts that there are others greater than himself. Whether they are Jackson or Castle, they must be in harmony with the story itself, not with each other. It is not a screenwriter's job to be interested in the real lives of actors. In fact, actors should refrain from reading such specific lines. At this awful dinner, we learn that Walker is a womanizer. Mary was already involved in adultery. While Dan Lawson watching them, we had already seen Walker glance at a necklace in a photograph. If the film were something that could be watched frame by frame, then it would be very easy to figure out. In general, there are overly flashy representations in a world where killers or criminals try not to reveal themselves. I know I'm repeating myself, but this part requires a lot of repetition. Stop imagining what you have in your hands as a movie. The quality of your script depends on your ability to imagine a movie that runs at 25 frames per second as if it were running at 1 frame per minute. Decide what you want to do from the very beginning. Are you going for a mysterious film? Then keep your characters from rambling and prevent your camera from peering curiously. The raw sense of mystery in the film Damaged is represented in a very ironic way. Mary hides the tablet, then a second later she reveals what she has hidden without any hesitation. An ironic representation of the film's sense of mystery. You see, your work is speaking to you. In ordinary films about serial killers, if you see a heartwarming scene, film will soon be drenched in blood. In this heartwarming scene, Mary is talking about vacation plans to mend her relationship with her husband. Even though this guy approached Mary, his intentions were different. He didn't kill Mary because she didn't fit his persona very well. Abigail was Jewish, Grace was Catholic, and Mary was just an anti-religious character, so he chose to keep his distance and act like a freak. However, it would have been reasonable to expect an attack from Dan or Walker. After a grueling chase scene, Mary unfortunately met her end at the hands of a poor riding. She was found dead. We then watched Colin and Glenn argue until the end of the film. We learned that Colin, who was questioned again, had previously gone to America but had been hanging out at Disney World. Thus, Colin, who came here from America, would become a suspect in the murders there, but I don't know if Disney World is in Chicago. Afterwards, we realized that he had learned the detail of the Chicago murders from someone. Walker, who was a heavy drinker before he started drinking milk, had revealed this information. Thus, we also learned Colin's source of inspiration. In a restaurant scene, we saw that Glenn, who had been removed from the case due to his wife's death, and Dan had something in common. The first victim of the Chicago murders, Sarah, was Dan's girlfriend. Since no one knew about their relationship, Dan was able to join the team investigating the murder. This situation led to Dan and Glenn becoming close, Dan gaining the upper hand and then directing Glenn in the final part of the film. Colin, who was acting erratically toward a woman at a bar, urinates on his own car tire after leaving the bar. We understand why Grace left this man. He doesn't know where to use his tool. At that moment, Colin is dying for stealing the role. Perhaps this is the most successful part of the film. If the film had been well constructed, this scene could have been truly powerful. For example, if the film had revealed that Dan was the killer right at the beginning, without resorting to metaphors, wouldn't Dan's line to Glenn have had a much greater impact on us?
Sorry, Gail. Grace. Why is there no photos of Marie?
You didn't kill Marie. The first two murders were different. Marie's was a carbon copy of the U.S. murders. So whoever killed her killed McGregor.
Why would that be effective? Because he killed Mary himself. Glenn doesn't suspect anything. I don't know how he found out that his wife was cheating on him. Most likely Mary felt remorseful and told him herself. She may have revealed who she was cheating with in this manner. Dan continues to manipulate Glenn like a puppet. We remember that Colin works for a company called ATAM and that Walker works for a security company. Here, Dan tells Glenn about the connection between Colin and Walker through a piece of paper. Of course, Colin had to die before this connection could be established. Now, all the signs in Glenn's mind point to Walker as the killer. However, the truth, as mentioned at the beginning of the film, is quite different from what Glenn believes. The truth comes out during a confrontation between Dan and Walker, who are meeting in a hotel room. Dan places the necklace Walker was looking at on the table and shows it to Walker years later. We then learn that Walker stole Dan's girlfriend and that the necklace was a gift from Walker to Sarah. During an argument with Sarah, she falls to the ground and dies. Dan becomes panicked about staying at the scene and decides to dispose of the body. He dismembers his girlfriend and removes her from the body. Meanwhile, he randomly places some of the pieces and the public concludes it is the work of a cult. The green light is given for Dan, who then kills those who remind him of the Walker-Sarah romance. Waiter, florist, jeweler, and the others. If Walker's facial recognition skills were slightly more advanced than those of a fish, he would have solved the case by looking at the faces of the murdered people, sent them to prison for life, and this film would never have been made. Once everything comes to light, Lawson shoots Walker. It's unclear whether he is dead or not. His survival might be left open for a potential sequel to Damaged. I hope they watch my video before moving forward. It would be better if they spend their time on another project. Damaged has gone to the graveyard of dead films. If they insist on making a second film, it will be difficult to do so without distorting the events of the first film. However, they could make a different film with a different name, distorting the past. I am here for consultation. Glenn realizes, albeit with difficulty, that Lawson is the killer. I don't know if he would have figured it out if Lawson hadn't left his Uruguayan and Italian passports on the table. The film then returns to Need for Speed, where there are more familiar confrontations in the forest, and then Lawson is mistaken for this guy. At the end, he strikes these pose and runs away. Walker's situation is unclear, Dan has escaped, and Glenn is in "we'll talk later" Dan mood, leaving the film to end with the hope of a sequel. However, I hope that doesn't happen. Look, I even found this. As you can see, this didn't work either. So, what was the real problem with Damaged? A film whose characters are as confused and lost as its pilots, and whose message is unclear. The classic first answer that comes to mind might be the creative department's lack of talent or one of the producers constantly meddling in others' work. But these answers aren't the kind of diagnosis you would make in a film review. They have no educational value whatsoever. I have no idea what was really going on. I can only speculate. My opinion is that it is the laziness I mentioned at the beginning of the video. The idea that good actors carry a film is a general mistake. Despite the existence of thousands of bad films with good actors, having a strong cast still seems to be a priority. Of course, I'm not ignoring financial concerns. Choices made for financial reasons support financial gain, but the film's need for a good writer and director cannot be ignored. I would like to mention another similar issue. I call this problem blindness caused by brightness, or the Michael Jordan effect. If you have a really good idea, you may have a raw belief that this idea will definitely carry you forward. If you put 4 ordinary guys around Michael Jordan, you will lose to any NBA team without Jordan. It won't matter how rare a gem Michael Jordan is. If the story has a brilliant idea and you place too much trust in that idea, it means that your idea is preventing you from seeing the light. That's what I felt throughout the film Damaged. A film crew burning with excitement at bringing a brilliant idea to life. In the end, a bunch of mistakes caused by rushing. Low viewership, poor ratings, and maybe not even recouping the costs. So, was there nothing good about the movie? Of course, there were positive aspects, but unfortunately they were based on the acting. Vincent Cassel was very good and Samuel L. Jackson was Samuel L. Jackson in some scenes. Look at how he conveys emotion here.
Was it hard to quit? The police? The bottle.
There's also a great example of the script flowing nicely in the film. The scene where Samuel L. Jackson asks what DCI stands for is very natural. It doesn't feel like someone wrote the story, it feels like the story is writing itself.
Detective Lawson. Hi, I'm Superintendent Kessler. This is DCI Glenn Boyd.
Detective Chief Inspector.
Simply put, Dennis from Chicago and police officers in other countries may have different titles. Instead of filling the film with this guy, the filmmakers could have looked for other more natural scenes. In terms of implication, there were more subtle hints in the film than the raincoat. For example, in this scene, Dan Lawson averts his gaze because he's the killer.
I've looked killers in the eye, and there's something.
Still, these are just consolations. I'm grateful that you have watched this far. This concludes the first video of the Damaged file. I am aware that I have omitted many details from the film, but none of these will invalidate what I have said, and they will only emphasize the film's carelessness more. You can even find one of the flaws in the film in this video. The screenshot I marked with 3 asterisks will be your clue. Share it with us when you find the mistake. In the second video we will move on to practice. We will try to solve the problems we discussed while staying true to the film's overall budget. We will add some things and remove others. In the third video, we will try to write a story after removing the budget as a factor. Remember to contribute to Rejectra's growth. Subscribe, like, point out any error you see in Damaged, and indicate any suitable patients for our movie clinic in the comments. I am Enes Zaferoğlu and I hope to see you again in the second video. At the same time, I wanna end my video with a cliché. I hope you don't mind it. Ladies and gentlemen.
This is just the beginning.